It is a time of war. A time of strife between all civilized people. We need a leader. No, we need a controller. But who will be strong enough to wield the might of our armies? Who has the ability to build our economy and command our troops? I know of someone. Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to Will It Steam Controller. Once again, it's time for the show where we ask the question, can I play this game with a Steam controller? And of course, we know that through trial by fire, through adversity and perseverance, the answer to this question is always yes. Today we'll be looking at Sins of a Solar Empire. More specifically, the Star Trek Armada 3 mod made for this game. This is a full conversion mod made by a team of developers that replaces every model, every sound effect, and every bit of the UI to a Star Trek theme. You can find their work on ModDB. I'll add a link in the description. Aside from the visuals and differences in the tech trees, the gameplay is the same as the base game, so you should be able to use this config with the base game as well. Sins of a Solar Empire is a real-time strategy and 4X game hybrid made by Ironclad Games and released in 2012. It combines the reflex-based unit micromanagement of a real-time strategy game with the slow-paced empire building and economy management of a game like the Civilization series. This game has you zooming in onto massive fleet battles, giving you the ability to control the behavior of a single ship, and in the next moment, zooming out to work on the economies of multiple different planets under your control. You start off on a single planet, gathering resources, building up a fleet, and expanding ever closer to your enemy's territory to engage them in battle and hopefully come out victorious. This game has a huge amount of depth, and it may seem like the Steam controller is ill-suited to a game like this. I'll be honest, this one was a tough one to get right, but I think I have something good for you. I started by getting the view controls right, feeling fluid and tight at the same time. You need to be able to move the camera at a moment's notice from a battle at one end of your space to your home planet, which is multiple planets off in the distance. I set the right trackpad as mouse and the right trigger as left click, like always. The left trigger will be the right click, which is used to give orders to selected units. I set the left trackpad to be a scroll wheel, letting you swipe up and down to control how close you are to the action. Make sure to set the in-game option for zoom to cursor. This is very helpful in navigating around since you can just zoom out, move your cursor to what you want to look at, and then zoom right into it. Next, I set the joystick to be arrow keys, which lets you pan around. You'll be dealing with controlling a lot of units in this game, and you need to have ways to select exactly which ones you need. Luckily, this game has a great set of features for this. You can click and drag your mouse to box select, selecting every military unit in that box. I set the left grip to be the shift key, which lets you add units to a selection you already have. The left bumper is the Alt button. Holding Alt and clicking on a unit will select every unit of that type on the screen. The face keys are set to a few important hotkeys, such as the research screen and the diplomacy screen. I set Y to be F2, which accesses the tech trees, and X is F1, which pulls up the diplomacy screen. B is escape, which backs out of menus and also pauses the game and opens the menu. I set A to the P button on the keyboard, which is the hotkey that I set to focus the view on any units you have selected. Finally, I used a mode switch on the right trackpad to be a mouse region over this part of the UI. This little section is where you build ships and upgrade planets. The goal here is not to have to move the mouse away from the main screen whenever I need to do these actions, which is quite often. So, now is the point where I was starting to run out of buttons on the Steam controller, and I still didn't have anything set up for control groups. In most RTS games, you can select a group of units, press a hotkey, and then press one of the numbers 1 through 9 to assign that specific selection of units to that number. When you press the appropriate number, that specific group of units will be selected again. This is critical when you're controlling hundreds of units at a time, which you will be in this game. But now I've used up almost all of my buttons and I still need to use the 1 through 9 keys and the control key.
So, did I just lay down the controller then? Did I give up and resign the Steam controller to the back of a forgotten drawer, never to be used again?
No, of course I didn't. You guys are smart. That's what this whole show is about. This time I used a technique that I haven't used before, which is the action layer. Action layers, alongside action sets, are an incredibly powerful tool with the Steam controller that lets you change parts of your configuration to something entirely different at the press of a button. It's basically a mode shift on steroids. Let me show you how I did it. The first thing to do is to create a new action layer which I call alternate, which will be completely blank at first. I set the right bumper to hold action layer. This means that when I hold the right bumper, it changes the entire controller configuration to the action layer I just made. The nature of the action layer means that controls stay the same unless I change them to something else. Inside this action set, I made 3 key changes. First, I set the left trackpad to now be a touch menu, with the number keys 1 through 9. I set the left grip inside this action layer to be left control. With these changes, I can now fully make use of control groups in the game. To make a control group, I hold the right bumper to get into the action layer, hold the left grip, and select 1 on the touch menu. This will set whatever units I have selected to control group 1. Now, just by holding the right bumper and using the left trackpad, I can select any of the control groups.
Now I can control the multitudes!
The next thing I set in the action layer was the joystick. I wanted a way to control the rotation of the camera, even though personally I like the map to stay oriented the same way. In the normal game, you click and drag the right mouse button to rotate. To achieve this behavior with the joystick, I did a couple of things. First, I set the style of input to joystick mouse. Then, I set the outer ring binding to the right click. Normally, this means that when you push the stick all the way to the end of its movement, it will send a button press. But I wanted the camera to rotate as soon as I pushed the stick. So to fix that, I simply set the outer ring binding radius to 0. This means that the joystick considers any movement away from the middle to be the outer ring, and I can control the camera with silky smoothness to my heart's content. The final thing I changed within the action layer was setting the right trackpad to a 4-button touch menu, with hotkeys to buy and sell the 2 major resources in the game's black market. The intent with this was to eliminate the need to move the mouse all the way up to the top right corner to use those buttons. So with these tools in hand, how did this configuration fare? When I sat down one night to work on this config, I worked on it for about the first half of that night. The second half of that time was spent simply playing the game. I didn't intend to do it that way. Usually when I finish a config, I shut the game down. But I played for several more hours with the config and it didn't feel like I was using a controller to play an RTS game. It just felt like I was playing a game. The fact that I was using a controller didn't feel like a hindrance at all to me. I think that's a good indicator that it's a pretty decent config. So what do you think? Got any ideas for a way that I could change the configuration? Let me know in the comments. Check the description for a link to my config for you to use. I'd also be interested in hearing what games you'd like me to see work on next. Thank you very much for watching.